you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Darnell Samuels and Joel Nikoloff.
Yo, man, you ready to play some sports or what?
Yes, dodgeball especially.
Oh, I can't imagine why.
Well, because we're talking about
tools of oppression? I'm just
dodgeball as a tool of oppression. Yes, dodgeball. Hopefully, listeners know how to play dodgeball.
Yeah. Dodge the ball.
Dodgeball. Yeah, I know. It's one of those things that it's one of those universal games that you've played growing up. You played?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was my favorite game to play in gym.
Why?
Because I think you never knew who was going to win. Right? Like with other sports, you kind of get this, like, if I was playing ball hockey, for example, you're going to end up with like a couple kids that are good and the rest kind of like either don't know how to shoot, don't know how to do this, don't know how to do that. And so like, whereas with dodgeball, for the most part, everybody can play. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's going to be disparity, but it's not like, think of when you played basketball in gym, mm-hmm. when you were a basketball player, right? Like, part of you is like, why are we doing this?
No, well, no, I always loved to play because, of course, I was always better than everybody in my gym class. Like me, a couple guys were always better, so you had a field day of just tearing apart everybody.
But I mean, if you did that every day, you'd be like, why? This is like, it gets old. Yes, yeah. It's fun to show off. Like, it's like, I like showing off that I'm the best at that sport, of course, right? But with dodgeball, I mean, I always found it fun. As much as I know there's another name of like murder ball, which I don't know if it's the same game or not.
Yeah, it is.
Or if it's a modification.
Yeah, we always called it dodgeball.
But in general, I don't remember it being like, I want to hurt you. I want to win. Like, I'm not trying to hit someone else in the face. Like, at least, I mean, that's me. Obviously, if someone is a bully, is there a potential for them to exploit the situation and hurt someone else? Sure. But it doesn't have to be dodgeball for them to be doing that.
I just got a flashback of
playing
Billy Madison. I'm playing dodgeball with the kids. I'm thinking of myself as Billy Madison playing with the kids. Okay, so I love playing dodgeball for hitting people in the face. That was my thing. So
I did not know you were gonna say that, and I just like.
Yeah. No, I'm being honest. So like, then I used to work like Parks and Rec with kids, like camps with kids. The reason why we played headshots, just so people are like, oh, well, you're targeting
yourself.
people. Well, the reason why we played headshots was because when you played like below the waist, people would, cheat. They would like just creep or and all,
you sit on your knees.
Yeah,
now you've got like a shorter.
Yeah, so you couldn't. Yeah, so then you couldn't hit them. So it was like really cheap, and so forth. So a couple of the kids were like, "Yo, let's go headshots." I'm like, okay, no problem. The whole idea was that the balls were soft.
Yeah. So getting in the head
headshot. Yeah.
Even...
So like if you've been hit in the face with a basketball or a soccer ball or that thing stings.
Yeah. So that's not what's happening.
That's not it's one of those super soft smushy balls. So if you got like directly hit in the nose, it wouldn't break your nose.
No.
Your eyes might water,
but there's nothing to complain
Yeah, you
about.
might see little sparkly things. No. But part of it is
that's a concussion. That would be a problem.
Yeah. But part of it was we were just trying to increase the level of competition
Yeah, like you
of the
said,
game.
I mean, you were trying to prevent people gaming the system, right? When you're like, oh,
Yeah, and you know, and it was the kids' idea, and they're like, "Hey, yo, let's just play headshots." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." But this recent report that came out by Joy Butler, who works for the University of British Columbia, and she works in the Department of Pedagogy and Phys Ed, was basically making an argument that dodgeball is legalized bullying, and so. Yeah, and so I guess you know what we can do. We can play the clip.
It is tantamount to legalized bullying, as we've been saying, and that you know when people say, when the teachers ask the students what they would like to play, they tend to listen to the people at the front with the loudest voices, and those people who don't want to play can't say anything. They kind of creep to the back.
Right, and those people in the front say dodgeball.
Right.
You point out that it's the only game where we make the human the target. Nobody's putting a ball through a net. No one's trying to score a goal. The object of the game is to hit the person across from you.
Yes, of course we had that with very hard balls at one point, and then the modifications have become softer balls, smaller balls. But the trouble with that is what the teacher is doing is controlling the aggression. So the aggression is still there and the intent is still there to hit somebody. But now the teacher has reduced the amount of impact it has, but it doesn't actually reduce what the student is doing.
Is it not a safe way for students to, express that regression, get it out in a way that is really not that harmful?
Well, I would hope that education is part of the ethic of care, of taking care of students in a safe way and creating an environment where they would learn to control aggression rather than let loose on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, gym class can be misery, though, for people who are not athletically inclined. I mean, does dodgeball make it that much more miserable?
Well, what do you do when you've got a ball flying at you? You run, and there were stories about little girls running to the back and trying to avoid. So what is she actually learning from that experience, except that she's being hounded? She's got to find a way to get away from it. I don't think that's what we're trying to do in physical education.
So, my biggest critique or criticism of that clip would be the last question. I don't think her question, she didn't answer the question, because he pointed out the fact that for those that are or not athletically inclined, gym class sucks, period. And so she just described a scenario, I think, of someone who is not athletically inclined having another bad experience in gym class. Now, I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I'm actually trying to point out the fact that he asked a really, really good question and she dodged it by painting a picture of a scenario you don't like, as opposed to answering a straight up question. Is dodgeball any more bad for the individual who doesn't like gym class? Or is dodgeball somehow a worse experience for the people who in general don't enjoy gym class and have bad experiences in gym? And I think, to me, that ignoring of that question is to some extent
A bit problematic.
Yeah, well, it also demonstrates probably the approach to this study or paper, in that you have a preconceived conclusion and you're trying to paint a narrative that fits the conclusion.
Yeah.
I'll get into more of why I think that.
Yeah, I definitely get where Joy Butler's coming from, and I hear what she's saying in regards to people who aren't as athletic and not being fun. But I think, well, one dodgeball is one of those equal opportunity games because you don't have to be good at anything to play dodgeball, and there's a lot of recourse. So if you do get hit and you do get out, especially if you're playing hitting below the waist, it is what it's not like playing with me with headshots. But if you're playing below the waist, you get out. then you're on the sideline. Then you still have an opportunity to redeem yourself, get back in, or even to hit that to get that person back who hit you. Yes, some people aren't that good at throwers, and you definitely see who's who.
But I mean, you can, if you, unless you can't throw, can't catch, and can't see, and have no reaction, okay, fine. That individual is going to have a horrible time in everything in gym class.
Right. Well, okay, hold on. In Joy's defense, Professor Butler, she proposes some kind of more social justice principled games. Now, I looked and I searched the net, and hopefully, if anybody finds it, I searched for lectures and interviews from her unpacking, or papers from her unpacking the ideas of these social justice friendly games. I didn't find anything, and and I guess I'm eager to hear what those games would look like that are a bit more politically correct.
Like soccer, where they don't keep score?
Oh, yeah, well, that too. But essentially, her argument is, what she's saying is that, get rid of dodgeball because it teaches oppression. Get rid of dodgeball because the practice of the game teaches oppression. And the oppression she links to this woman named Iris. Sorry, one moment. Iris Marion. Yeah, Iris Marion. And basically, she has these.
Yeah. So here, let me just jump in for 1 second.
Yeah.
So it's Iris Marion Young's
Yes.
5 Faces of Oppression.
Yes.
It was an article published in her 1990 book, Justice and the Politics of Difference.
Right. But yeah, so part of it is it's a nuanced look at oppression. So so she isn't looking at oppression from the traditional perspective of political dictator violently preventing people from exercising freedoms. So Young's view of oppression is people suffer from inhibition of their ability to develop and exercise their capacities. So domination is structural or systemic phenomena that prevent people from self-determination. This is something everyone should have. So it's more of a psychological oppression and being able to self-determine one's potential. And anything that hinders that is the oppression. So Iris is young. So her theory, tying into Joy's theory, into dodgeball. Dodgeball being a game where you isolate a person. So like you have your guy on the sideline and you're inbound. You know what I mean? And you have a ball. Like me and you are on the same team. Me and you're on the other side. I have a ball. Me and you are communicating like, okay, yo, we're going to get this guy. You go high, I go low. That type of thing. And now that person's a target. And that's kind of teaching people how to isolate and use people as targets.
I want to take a step back because I see.
I just wanted to clarify and define oppression and so forth.
So the way she's defining, or Young defines oppression, is more about essentially preventing someone from self-determination.
Yes.
Right. So, or let's put it in there's a restriction on how you can act because of an oppressor.
Say that again?
There's a restriction on how you can act because of an or because you're being oppressed. So, I mean, that's, or
somebody,
preventing you
from doing that.
But she's narrating that as oppression. And the reason, as I hear that, I'm like, but are you creating any sort of scenario where someone has power over someone else to then say, oh, that's therefore oppression? And this is where I think things become problematic. Because if you start to look at those 5 faces of oppression, right? Exploitation. What's their primary example? Using other people's labors to benefit for oneself.
Yes, and see, so the way, because now, mind you, now part of it is she's translating it not politically, but she's translating it in the game, and that's where you kind of have to see, okay, and yes, she's not talking about. Yes, Young talks about the aspect of political the political sphere, but she's talking about in the context of a game, and that's where she's drawing the connections.
But you got to remember, the way it worked was they asked. So let me quote from the National Post article, or sorry, actually I'm quoting from the Washington Post. What she says is the researchers, or the article from the Washington Post, and we'll have the links in the show notes page. We'll have a bunch of the articles for, a couple against, whatnot. So the researchers set out to interview middle school age students about broader questions in physical education courses, but kept hearing the same thing from, and this I thought was really peculiar. It says, kept hearing the same thing from certain students. They hated dodgeball. So I'm curious what those certain students are. I didn't quite comprehend who those certain students were, but it says the interviewers dug deeper, asking students why. So why did they hate dodgeball? And then plotted those answers against these 5 faces of oppression. So to me, it sounds like the approach was they hate dodgeball. How do I fit this into an oppression narrative that's following this 5 faces of oppression? As opposed to taking a more objective approach of studying dodgeball and trying to come to a conclusion of, is this a productive game in gym? Right? Like this, the way this article describes the approach, to me, says you're trying to reach a conclusion you already have. Because you're saying, like specifically it says, they plotted the answers against why kids hated dodgeball against an oppression narrative. So let's go into the 5
faces of oppression. So 1, exploitation, taking advantage of a person, and then 2, marginalization, mentally and physically. So it's mentally and physically disabled versus the autonomous and independent. So you have the weak versus the strong, and that's how she's defining marginalization. And then powerlessness, those who lack authority or power and privilege. 4 is cultural imperialism, dominant cultural products of the society. And then 5, violence, not only direct victimization, but daily knowledge they are liable to violation, solely on the account of their identity. Just the threat deprives them of freedom and dignity. So as I was,
where did that come from? Was that from the National Post article?
No. I was doing some research,
Okay.
and part of it is, again, like, putting yourself in Joy Butler's shoes and making the connections, because it's one thing, for us to make the connections to oppression and political sphere and capitalism and all that stuff. That's pretty simple. But what she's doing is applying it, like you're learning these principles through dodgeball. So as I was reading it, and if you could pull back and rewind and listen, if you played dodgeball before, you'd be like, okay. And for those of you who don't know how to play dodgeball, we'll put a link in the show notes so you can learn how to play dodgeball. And so basically you're just saying, okay, well, where do we see exploitation in the game? Where do we see marginalization in the game? Where do we see powerlessness in the game? Where do we see cultural imperialism? And where do we see violence in the game?
So here's where I would say I take issue with that, because those are 5 characteristics of exploitation. You have a presumption of exploitation, of oppression. Right? So the difference to me would be saying, okay, let's take the scenario that you used with respect to isolation. And how do I categorize that behavior? If I want to look at it as a positive side, it's 2 people working together to win.
Yeah, she also mentioned, and remember in the audio clip, she mentions aggression, and aggression being a negative, I guess. Yeah,
which, I mean, and that's why I made the joke about, soccer without score.
Right.
Because, aggression is such a, I mean, would you classify competitiveness as aggression? Like, and this is where I would go back to the whole point I made at the very, very beginning about bullying. When I said, are bullies going to potentially exploit this game? Fine. That is a fair criticism of this game.
Well,
I think, right?
No,
Like,
well, I would say that, now it's so funny. But bullying is a part of every game.
I wouldn't agree with that.
No? Well, I guess I'm thinking.
Because I think of bullying as in acting outside of the rules in order to
No,
like when it comes to sport.
No. So like for example, when we play, I don't know if you guys have a term in hockey, but in basketball, we have a term called bully ball, where if I'm bigger than you and me and you're playing 1-on-1, I'm just backing you down and I'm beating you up physically.
But that's not bullying. That's called exploiting the mismatch.
What would Joy call it?
So, but that's the point, right? Like, to me, bullying, like, think of bullying in a simpler context
Yeah.
of, like, kids who beat people up, people who intimidate. But what is the means of intimidating? Intimidating in sport generally is to gain an advantage so that you can win, as opposed to, to violate someone's person.
Yeah, well, even then, whether you play hockey or football, which are more physical games, you can kind of let that out. For basketball, exploitation and bullying happens in the form of isolation or putting a man on an island, as we say. So you put somebody on an island, you wave off everybody, and then you try to humiliate him, 1-on-1. So that's how I would see it. But there's an interesting aspect. So when we look at the economic principle, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's always trade-offs. So even if we hypothetically said, okay, well, we should take all ideas seriously, because all ideas have consequences. So people saw the show and they're like, oh man, this is so stupid, but it's not really stupid, because a lot of times these ideas gain traction and become popular. So David Staples wrote an article in response to the to this article. He writes for the
his was in I have it from the Edmonton Journal.
The Edmonton Journal, and he was basically saying that there are smart and safe ways to channel powerful human instincts. It's a clever pantomime of a primal activity of hunting. Children get to play, act at being both predator and prey, but without any bloodshed. It's important to note that it's this defining aspect of dodgeball that so offends the academics. They inappropriately inject social justice thinking into the realm of games and play, and thus fail to grasp the innate, safe, but satisfying allure of the game. I thought that was well said.
Yeah, I mean, his article I thought was really, really good.
Except the last point 5 about headshots and dodgeball.
Well, and I mean, I actually appreciated when you were saying why you played headshots, and I would even say, it depends, right? Like,
hold on. A part of it is it made it more competitive.
So I was going to say, in your context,
yeah,
it sounded like you had a good spectrum of athleticism. Now, but everybody was athletic.
Well,
and so, my point is, you don't have the.
I would.
Well, I thought you were at a Parks and Rec camp that was intended for kids to be, athletically inclined.
No. That's definitely not the situation. Not all the kids were athletically inclined.
And I would say, it sounds. The one criticism or the one thing that she raised, a good point to some extent, was the kids that don't want to participate in gym they're sitting in the back not saying anything, and the kids that want to play dodgeball are in the front. Okay, fine. I can have appreciation for the fact that some kids don't want to play, and how do we resolve that?
They can choose not to play.
Well, and I mean, part of this gets into the question around. School being in the structure that it is, where everybody has to participate in gym in the same capacity because of just the nature of the school system, as opposed to having kids that, let's say, just want to play dodgeball.
Right. So then what would you say to people's response to their incentives?
Well, I mean, I would say, are we pointing out a problem with the game or the institution in which the game is being played? But that's a total sidebar question.
Yeah.
But I think we're just ignoring that and going, well, school's a foregone conclusion in the structure that it's currently enabled, and therefore I'm not even going to think about the fact that maybe it has to do with the fact that I'm putting kids in a gym class who actually need a different type of a gym class.
Right.
You
No, 'cause-
almost need entry level gym and competitive. I mean, I know I'm being a little bit ridiculous with what I'm saying, but the point is, it's kind of a result of the situation, which is the institution, not just the tool of oppression that they're painting it out to be. It's kind of ignoring the context, because if you have dodgeball in a more, as I said, you go to play it at a sports camp. Now, how much of her arguments fall to the wayside?
Yeah, no, that's interesting you say that, because part of it I was thinking from the perspective of, the appearance of righteousness and virtue signaling, and the idea of oppression. Nobody wants to be an oppressor. So like terms like equality, inclusiveness, democracy was mentioned also in the paper. Have an appearance of are these things are these things inherently virtuous? So part of it is it tugs on our heartstrings, I think, and I think just to take a step back and put ourselves back in Joy's shoes, it tugs at our heartstrings, and it kind of makes us take a step back. Okay, hold on, wait a minute, oppression, like I don't want to contribute to that. So in a sense, that kind of gets
a motivation or an emotional response
for the gym teacher. Yeah, because the gym teacher, they're going to be gym teachers are going to say, you know what, look, she might be onto something, and I don't want to be a part of, making these little Hitlers.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where, you as a gym teacher, you might say, okay, you know what, guys, let's play pin the tail on the donkey, or.
Well, and I would say, I think think back to how often did you actually play dodgeball?
Whoa.
Dude, all the time. No, I mean in gym, in school.
Not in school.
Not a lot. Like, we
Barely.
never played. So her point that all the kids want to play, part of the reason why we don't play is because there's so many kids that don't want to play. But David Stapleton's article, Staples, sorry. He kind of made some good points. I don't necessarily agree with his titles. Like, his point one was called dodgeball is the most democratic of sports, which I was like, that's so cheesy, it's stupid. But what he said in the paragraph that followed, I thought was amazing in respect to and I kind of mentioned some of it at the very beginning, where basically a wide spectrum of skills can be useful, right? Like, if you're not good at throwing, when we start the game, you don't run up and grab a ball.
Right. Oh yeah, when you got to run to the line.
Your job is not to grab a ball, right? Okay. Guess what? You're standing at the back as opposed to the front. Why? Because that gives you more time to catch. If you have bad reflexes, right? You're gonna set yourself up to success. But if you're gonna be a Debbie Downer who just runs to the corner and says, "I don't really want to play. I'll wait till I get hit and then I'll walk off the court," to me, that's more indicative of your character when it comes to participating in group activities than it does with respect to these tools of oppression.
Right. And you remember, if you're not a good thrower, at least you can possibly catch. Or if you get out and you're on the sideline, you're still active. You can still contribute.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it depends on the rules of the game, right? But think of it this way: the kid who can't play, basketball, who can't play soccer, chance of you catching a soft, spongy ball is pretty high, right? I mean, again, if someone's throwing it at your face, hopefully you'd know how to duck.
Or catch.
But catching it into your face is harder than when someone throws it at your chest. Guess what? Someone else on your team just came back, and maybe you're the reason they won the game.
Yeah.
My perception is you're fitting your preconceived notions, or you're fitting the context, which is dodgeball, into your preconceived notions. Because really, what is her purpose? Her purpose is to have more social justice activities in physical education.
Yes. Guess
what? There's a problem within academia, period. And I'm going to reference some people might have already heard of this. There's a couple names that it goes by. One of them is Grievance Studies, or Academic Grievance Studies. It was, I want to get the exact names of the individuals. Peter Boghossian, James Lindsay, and Helen Pluckrose. I'll share two of them, not the female, the two guys were on Joe Rogan walking through what they did. These guys basically created studies and submitted them to these far left journals that really had this Marxist ideology of oppressor, and so much of what they're doing and what their goal or their idea was to really demonstrate. Sorry, the other name it goes by was Sokol Squared scandal. They were creating bogus academic papers and submitting them to academic journals in the areas of culture, queer, race, gender, fat, and sexual studies. And to me, when I saw this, I was like, the context of oppressor is so much of what these guys were exploiting. Where, like, I mean, if you do any sort of digging, you will see the absurdity that they got. Like, this fake study was basically awarded, like, given an award for being so good.
Mm-hmm.
And really, they were demonstrating that, really what I've been saying, that there's this aspect of, I have a conclusion that I want to reach. Let's produce a study that shows the conclusion.
Right.
And if you listen to these guys talk, if you listen to how they, they started out submitting a couple, studies that got rejected. And then they said, all of a sudden, they just started to understand how the mind was working. Dude, they rewrote Mein Kampf. And we're about to get it published.
What? Sorry, Mein Kampf is a book written by Adolf Hitler to rally the people to promote his political movement.
Yeah, again, I'll show it. Like, they didn't get it published. They were in the process.
Mm-hmm.
When they kind of got, I think it was when they won the award for that. They kind of actually had, I think the one they won the award on was called Dog Park, which I don't even want to break into what it's about, but you'll have to read it to really understand the level of, and my point here is not to say that this study necessarily was bad. I just, this Grievance Studies affair really points out the fact that there's a problem in academia at times where studies are not repeatable, and then the other side of it is that you're trying to prove a conclusion. But if you understand anything about statistics, the way you set up a hypothesis in statistics is actually backwards. You're actually trying to prove the negative. Like, and I mean, I'm not going to get into explaining how, like, I might have not worded that in the clearest fashion, but the idea is that you actually reach a conclusion that your hypothesis was false to some extent. I'm getting more, it's more in the mathematical side of things. Obviously, when you're doing a study on something that's more objective, it's a little bit harder to, but the idea is that, if you're trying to study something, as I pointed out with respect to dodgeball, okay, let's look at dodgeball objectively. Right. Let's start laying out particular actions or particular components and start, like, evaluating them from both sides. It's kind of what we and you try and do with our podcast, right? Like, I want to steelman the opposition. I want to show things as strong as possible. But if I've already know what my conclusion is going to be, and I'm only going to publish, example, this is what these guys were doing with academic grievance studies. They were demonstrating that these journals are only publishing things that are in agreement, right? If you produce a study that shows that their narrative of oppression in a particular context is false, it's not going to get published. Not because the study is bad, but because the conclusion doesn't fit their they had, like, I can't even get into it, but if you really look into this story about the Grievance Studies, it will blow your mind at the level of ridiculousness that goes on into this, Marxist ideology. And the craziest part, so this isn't right-wing people exploiting the left. This is people that are very progressive in nature. These three people that I listed, their actual complaint was that good studies in this, or good academic studying of this, of these areas is not being done because it's only the far progressive narrative stuff that's getting published, and they're not actually finding truth. They're just perpetuating an echo chamber to some extent.
Right. No, that's a good point you make, Joel. So, like, when we look at the rules of the game that influence individual choices and incentives, so again, Steel Manning, Joy Butler's position that she's arguing that the rules of dodgeball influence players to be oppressive, isolating your opponent for targeting them. But there's a belief that that activity of dodgeball is correlated with the theme of oppression, and thus a claim that dodgeball causes oppression. So what I'm getting at is that this is a fallacy of the post hoc fallacy, which is argument of correlation and causation, and it's very important for you guys to understand the difference between causation and correlation in the fallacy that it causes. So I'll give an example of one. So for example, you have two hospitals. One has a high death rate and another one has a low death rate. So you would assume that the one with the low death rate is the better hospital. But then the middle factor, or the
true causation.
The true causation. So you would make a correlation that the one with the lower death rate is the better hospital because less people die. But the true causation is that when people have serious illness or life-threatening injury or whatever the case may be, they go to the one that has the higher death rate. Well, the one with the higher death rate is because it's the better hospital. So those people with the most serious life-threatening injuries or whatever the case may be, they go to that hospital and they're more likely to die because they're that serious. Now, mind you, not to say that some do get saved, but because the most serious ones go to that hospital, they have a higher death rate versus the one that has a lower death rate where, basically nobody goes if your life is being threatened.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the idea would be mathematically, if anyone's mathematically inclined, taking the concept of like a weighted average as opposed to just simple averages. And what that means is, you would, when you're estimating the death rate, you would include the risk of death pre-entering the hospital as part of the weighting factor.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So if you have a really low risk of death, the low risk of deaths at that hospital actually turns out to be not comparable unless you consider the risk of death entering the hospital with the hospital that has a high risk of death, right? So to make numbers with respect to what you're talking about, if everyone coming into the hospital has only a 5% chance of dying and their rate of death is 1% for patients, but the other hospital has like an 80% chance of death and their rate of death in the hospital is only 20%. I mean, I just made those numbers up, but I guess if you kind of work through the math on those, you'd kind of be like, well, actually, that hospital seems to have a better death rate.
Right, of course. And I'm just going to give you guys one more just so you guys grasp the concept. So, for example, going to bed with your shoes on causes headaches. All right? Going to bed with your shoes on causes headaches. So every time you go to bed with your shoes on, you get headaches. So there's the correlation. They're related.
So I know where you're going to take this because I read your notes. But what you're demonstrating is the term that would be used is called common cause. So two events happen at the same time because the cause of the event, which is
the cause of the event is drunkenness.
Getting drunk is the common cause for both of those things to occur.
Yes.
And so it's easy when you have a common cause, the two events we're looking at are correlated, and to misdiagnose that correlation as causation.
Yes. So because you're drunk, you don't take your shoes off, and then you wake up with a hangover, a headache. So again, the reason why we're harping on this is because it's important to, as you analyze the news, that you're being able to identify the fallacies in the reasoning. Now, with all that said, both correlation and causation don't apply in this case for this particular paper, and that's where your spidey senses got to be tingling. So the correlation there is no correlation between dodgeball and oppression, and there is no causation between dodgeball and oppression.
Well, and if there is, they definitely didn't prove it. Right? Like, I mean, I would think if you were trying to demonstrate somehow that dodgeball causes oppression, you would have to start to look at kids that asked to play dodgeball, the frequency, and then show that those are the types of kids who somehow have the equivalent of today's slaves. But again, the problem is like, how are you defining oppression? And this is kind of coming back to it, like you used a couple definitions that I would say, if I was looking at the Washington Post article that I was using, they're using things that, exploitation, for example, using other people's labor to benefit oneself. Mm-hmm. So let's take labor out of that and just say using others to benefit yourself. But, we go back to the concept of wages. Like we would talk about, it's a mutually beneficial exchange. But you're not willing to hire someone for $20 an hour if he's only going to contribute $10 worth of work. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Like he has to give you more than what you're paying him. Otherwise, it's a bad choice for you. Mm-hmm. And this is where I would say the economics come into play, because people are not necessarily comprehending that you can have mutually beneficial exchanges. Things aren't zero sum. In general, I mean, unless you're talking about, certain types of trades like stock trades or call options, which are zero sum. There's not a lot of exchange when it comes to people trading where you would say, the value you got is exactly equal to the value I gave up. Because in general, I mean, I've talked about it before in terms of, when you're buying something used, you essentially have a maximum price and the other person has a minimum price they're willing to sell for. And, whoever's got a little bit more power, which I think is, we're getting close to the end of time here, but I think this is it's an economic principle that I've been really wrestling with respect to power. For the one who has a little bit more power, they're going to get closer to their, edge of the range than the other person. And the example in the past when I've given it, buying a used phone on Kijiji, when there's more sellers than there are buyers, the buyer has more power, and vice versa. When you have way more people on the other side of the exchange looking at you to potentially engage, you have more power because you get to be selective with who you engage with. Mm-hmm. And so, I think something like the word exploitation, unless you're going to use a very strict definition of something like violating someone's property rights, you're opening yourself up to a conversation around, I can make anything qualify as exploitation if I define the parameters wide enough. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm critiquing the labor thing here, because, using other people's labors to benefit yourself. Well, did they receive a benefit? Did they got paid? That's mm-hmm. a benefit. So you gave them a benefit, and then in turn they gave you a benefit, which was the work that you completed. Mm-hmm. But they're saying because the work they completed was worth more to you than the amount you paid them, somehow that's exploitation. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the point is that, like, using the word oppression, is so broad and so widely defined, especially when you start to look at things that are very Marxist in definition. And I would say they're largely really ignorant to economics.
Okay. So what's your 2 cents you want to leave the audience with?
I think when we see things like this, we need to be really taking a critical eye of it, because right now academia has a lot of influence, whether it's politicians that want to read something like this and then say, oh, we're going to outlaw, dodgeball in our province because it's bad based on this, this study and similar others like it, or other sports. In general, I think we need to be careful because, I mean, you started to ask the question earlier of, what's the consequences or what are the benefits, right? Like, there's 2 sides to this. Like, dodgeball in and of itself, like, whatever, it's one game, it's not a big deal. But, like, if we take their arguments to now say, oh, you can't play soccer. Oh, now
are you saying the unintended consequences?
I'm saying the idea of there's a trajectory that we're on. So dodgeball represents a trajectory, or banning dodgeball represents a trajectory. And that's what I'm concerned with, is the trajectory. Right? Like, as I said, dodgeball in and of itself is nothing. Like, whatever. You want to stop playing dodgeball in school? Like, I think it's silly. I think you should let that be school by school. And if parents don't want their kids to play dodgeball, they go to the school that doesn't allow dodgeball. That's how you're going to figure out whether or not people want to play dodgeball. So what I'm getting at, though, is, you know, the trajectory, as you referenced, right? Her motives aren't as simple as dodgeball. They're about, we need to make sure we have social justice sports or social justice games within gym. And I would say that, unfortunately, I think social justice is a term that is used way more broadly than it should be. And I mean, personally, I am absolutely pro undoing social injustice. And so the reason why I word it that way is to say, you find a particular injustice, i.e. someone has been violated, someone's rights or property has been exploited or taken, you undo that injustice, case by case. Absolutely, no question asked. But to say social justice, like, it's too broad, it's too wishy-washy, that, like, oh, well, someone who's an immigrant from another country doesn't understand the rules of this game, therefore we can't play it at school. Like, I just came up with an absurd example off the top of my head to point out the fact that, like, well, is that really the best approach? Like, maybe do we need to take care and consideration for that individual who has now come to this class and is not understanding? Absolutely. Like, don't put words in my mouth to say that I'm saying don't care about the immigrant who doesn't understand the game. I'm saying the resolution of not playing the game is ignorant to the fact that that's actually not a productive solution.
Okay. No, that's helpful. That's helpful. I would say, like, okay, well, again, you know, I'm looking at it from, you know, economics as the art of making choices, and then I'm merging, like, theology is the application of God's word in every area of life, and that, you know, ideas have consequences. So part of it is, you know, identifying the fallacy is all about finding the definition. And a lot of times, you know, politically, there's politically charged terms that we throw around, like equality, fairness, oppression. Like, nobody wants to be an oppressor, nobody wants to be unfair, and so forth. But you kind of see, like, political parties, you know, rallying around these words, and you know, of course, these terms mean different things to different groups of people. But again, you see these words being leveraged to help people make decisions. And it's very weird because, like, the connection, there is no causality, there is no correlation between dodgeball and oppression. And so you have this unconscious learning that's being implied by Joy Butler, where you are becoming an oppressor unconsciously. And Grant Sutherland, in his paper, the privilege of the gaps, he says it really well like this. The activist scholars primarily locate privilege neither in the laws of the land nor in explicit attitudes and behaviors, but in the realm insulated from hard empirical examination, the unconscious mind. There was, and I did the search, and hopefully, you know, you guys could do the search as well. I asked our interns to look into it to find the connection between dodgeball and oppression, and there wasn't any. And it was almost implied, like, okay, well, there's this unconscious learning where you're doing things, and of course, then it leads to policies of unlearning what you don't know that you know, which is like this philosophy, this theory that leads to nowhere. And I say all that to say, you know, I was reading through Colossians, and, you know, Paul says to the people in Colossae that, you have to be aware of ideas that are not fruitful. And he says this in Colossians chapter 2, verse 22 and 23. Such rules, so he's saying that now that you're in Christ, you have to be careful of being pulled by lofty ideas. So he says, such rules are mere human teachings about things that deteriorate as we use them. These rules may seem wise because they require strong devotion, pious self-denial, and severe bodily discipline, but they provide no help in conquering a person's evil desires. So again, how do we conquer oppression? By withholding dodgeball. Right? Do you see what I'm saying? There are these philosophical ideas that sound lofty, they sound deep, but are empty, and especially not just Christians but even non-Christians as well. To be able to pay attention and be able to diagnose what is good, what is the good, what is the true, as opposed to, because if you're not able to do that, then you know what, Joy Butler's argument does have legs. If you're not able to discern, okay, well, what is good? What does that mean to be good?
And I mean, I'm totally in agreement. I think you've kind of really hit the nail on the head. The only, I think, to tie in what I was saying earlier is the other side of it is how have they defined oppression? Because we instantaneously look at the concept of oppression and be like, I'm not an oppressor. I don't want to be an oppressor. Oh, if you think dodgeball is oppressive, then I got to get out. And oh, look, you've put a good argument together. Mm-hmm. But the question, the problem is, have you inspected the nature of that argument and go, hold on, the presuppositions, and there's a reason why I focused on that particular part of the Washington Post article. One, because it sounds like when they said, oh, hearing the same thing from certain students. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, and maybe I need to read the study, because I think right now they've only presented the study and it's coming out in a journal later. But it makes me wonder, okay, how many of did you only include students who hated dodgeball? Mm-hmm. Right? To then figure out, why did those ones feel oppressed? Well, what happens if only 5% of the people who play dodgeball feel oppressed? Mm-hmm. Is this study even worth its salt? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Basically, are these, and then I would say, okay, is that 5% representative of, who do they really represent? Are these people always feeling oppressed? Mm-hmm. Right? And now, it sounds like those people who they classified as the certain students who hated dodgeball, they didn't use the word oppressed. They then turned what they said as to why they hate dodgeball and fit it into an oppression narrative. And so again, and then, what's the nature of that oppression narrative? How are they defining oppression? And that's where you can look at this and go, you know what? I don't really agree with this. The way that, if there's a bunch of assumptions that lay out the context of a study, and this is what happens all the time. Studies reported in the news are absolutely horrible. That's why you hear oh, drink 1 glass of red wine is good for your health. Oh, eating chocolate is good for your health. Oh, eating chocolate's bad for your health. Because a study gets published and then, well, it's only going to make the headline news when it's sensationalized. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares that, a study found that you're 0.5% healthier when you drink 1 glass of red wine a week. Mm-hmm. That sounds absolutely boring and nobody cares.
Right.
But that might actually be the conclusion that was sensationalized by the headline that you thought was good. And so, I mean, I know I'm kind of going on a rant, and we've already kind of really wrapped up, but the point is that, digging into the context, especially for things like this, I brought up that other, that scenario, that the Grievance Studies affair, not to necessarily say that this particular study falls into that category specifically, but to say that, affair demonstrates there's, a potential you're going to read a study and go, this is hot garbage. Because it's structured in such a way that, of course, they're going to come to the conclusion because there's no other conclusion that could be reached.
Right.
When you're saying, how does the reason people hate dodgeball fit into 5 faces of oppression? What other conclusion can you come to than the dodgeball is oppressive? For the people who hate dodgeball, it is oppressive because I've figured out how their answers of hatred fit into oppression. Like, oh, it just, oh man. And okay. I want to finish with the one more thing, and maybe this is not as sensational as I'm gonna make it sound, but it was amazing to see the level of coordination that came out on, what was the date? June 3rd was when all these articles started popping up. And I can share the link. It was a webpage. I don't even know if I really like it. I started following it on Facebook, called Freedom for All. 8 different mainstream media outlets had literally the exact same headline with respect to dodgeball isn't just problematic, it's an unethical tool of oppression. Some form of that headline was in, the Vancouver Sun, Montreal Gazette, the Star Phoenix. Obviously, we've been quoting the National Post and Washington Post. Washington Post, I think, came out a little bit later. But it, it's just. I'll put a link to this too. There's a YouTube video where Eric Weinstein defines 4 kinds of fake news. And to me, this is an example of fake news. Not because the news is false, but because it's being promoted in such a fashion where everybody's going to see the headline. And so it's this idea of, he uses the example of like being above the fold. So old school, think of a newspaper. Things that are below the fold get seen less than the things above the fold. And so by having all of these, mainstream news outlets put out literally the same article all at the same time, is a bit of, propagandist in nature.
Is that your 2 cents?
Oh, yeah. I think it was like 2 cents times 50.
Okay, well, again, we'd love to hear what you guys think about dodgeball, whether you,
I think we should.
or
I think we
against
should.
it.
On the day this comes out, we'll throw up like a Twitter poll.
Yeah.
Did you love or hate dodgeball in school?
And do you think it's oppressive? And another
Yeah, maybe
question.
we'll put up a couple.
And do you think I'm wrong for playing with headshots with the kids?
Yeah. Well, headshots or no headshots dodgeball. That'll be a couple of Twitter polls.
So let us know what you guys think, and remember, 6 cents makes change.